Welcome to our YouTube channel, In Our Basement. My name is Niels.
And I'm Gail. We're going to be having conversations and share our thoughts about things that we're really passionate about.
And just before we get started, go ahead and hit that subscribe button.
And if you like the content, then feel free to share it on your social media platform.
All right, welcome to another episode of In Our Basement. I'm Niels.
And I'm Gail.
And we're so excited because, for the past few episodes, we've been doing shows where it's just the two of us talking. But now we are going to start inviting guests maybe for the next few episodes. And maybe we'll do some where it's just us talking. But, there are endless possibilities with technology while there are also limits. And so, Gail, who are we having on the show?
We are so thankful. Our good friends from Yellowknife, Stephanie and Johnelle, have agreed to join us to talk about this really difficult conversation and the vulnerability that it takes to have difficult conversations like this is so great. So we're so thankful for them.
One of the goals of our podcast is to encourage healthy relationships, especially within the context of community. Sadly, today we find that the topic of racism is dividing our community. And so this conversation was so good that it was actually a longer conversation, that this is going to be done in two parts. And so without further ado, Stephanie and Johnelle, welcome to our show, In Our Basement. All right. Well, welcome, Stephanie and Johnelle, all the way from Yellowknife to our basement. And it's just such a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for joining us. It's just so good to see you two, because I guess we first met you both in Yellowknife at a common place called the Yellowknife Vineyard Church. And and just before we were even, Gail and I were just talking. And actually, in our most recent, or one of our recent podcast episodes, Gail was telling us, it was in our...
I mentioned one of you, but I didn't say a name. It was just a very important part of us choosing Yellowknife Vineyard.
Yeah, it was when we first came to the Yellowknife Vineyard Church, somebody gave Gail a big hug. you got to tell us that story.
All right, so... Yes. I walked in, this might have been at what I call forced fellowship, but that's one of the best parts of the church, is that it's worship and announcements, and then it's coffee time, and then we come back together for the sermon. But what I loved was we basically were greeted by a lot of people, and I just remember Stephanie coming and just giving me
I thought you didn't say names.
Sorry, what did you say?
I thought you didn't call any names.
Well, we did it in the last one.
We did it in the last one, but now you're here, and I'm okay, I got to tell this good story about, that was one of, the best parts about that first Sunday there, was that we got accepted. We were these strangers, and you just accepted us with a great big hug, and I think that was one of the best welcomes into a church that I personally have ever had, and so thanks for that.
You're part of the reason with why we stayed. And then, and then what were you gonna say?
Well, yeah, and Johnelle, I just remember so much fun times with you at our life group.
Yeah.
Lots of okay, so I have a little secret.
Oh, actually, this is the funny story. Is this the one with the...
No, probably not.
Oh, okay, anyways, go for it.
Uh-oh. Okay, so we were doing a series on Song of Songs.
Right. Oh, yeah, love song, yeah.
And Johnelle was reading out the scripture, and I was just holding my phone like this. And Johnelle, you were like, are you recording? I was like, no. But I recorded the whole thing. Because I think Niels was gone, and it was just us, a whole bunch of girls together, and that was such a good one. Yeah.
For some reason, I thought you were going to share the story where you make jerk chicken and you used a third of the bottle, and Johnelle was just Johnelle, how much sauce are you supposed to use? Is it a spoon, right?
A spoonful.
So this girl who is not the most cultured, Niels loves his jerk chicken. so I found this like jar of jerk, what do you call that? Jerk paste? I don't know.
Yeah, something.
And I was like, well, all of these different ones, you just dump the whole thing in. So I think I must have done like half of the bottle for this jerk chicken.
Yes, you did.
At least you tried.
So did I eat it? No, I think I had a couple bites, but I think Niels, you.
No, I ate it. It was spicy.
I told Johnelle, and you told me the real way to make it, and ever since then, it's been enjoyable.
You've learned.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, ladies, thank you again so much for joining us. Good to kind of start off on a light note, and because this podcast might be a bit of a heavier one, see, one of the goals of our podcast is to encourage people to have healthy relationships within healthy community, and also encouraging us to take care of ourselves. Sadly, we find ourselves in 2020 with it being difficult to have healthy community because we find that our communities are divided over racism. And in 2020, I'm asking seriously, like, is this something that we are still wrestling through? And sadly, this is the reality of it. The deaths of Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, recently, the shooting of Jacob Blake, have sparked conversations at a national level, international level. And so I just, began to wonder and hope that there is good coming out of these raw conversations. And so for that, we are thankful that, you have, that you've accepted our invitation to come here and have a raw conversation with us, as we also both know you really well. And I'm very thankful for our friendship. And so, Gail, do you want to start off with the first one?
So, I am a Caucasian white girl who grew up on the prairies in a city that was not very multicultural in the 90s. And so I didn't have a lot of that culture around me. I didn't have a lot of colored people. And so I know that both of you grew up in very different places. Stephanie grew up in Toronto, and Johnelle, what city did you grow up in?
Kingston,
okay.
Jamaica.
Kingston, okay.
Jamaica, yeah.
Jamaica. All right. So I was wondering so you grew up in Toronto and you grew up in Kingston, Jamaica. And I just wanted, either of you can answer first, but how do you remember feeling growing up as a child, being seen with the color of your skin?
Well, I think I'll let Johnelle go first with your experience just growing up in Jamaica.
Oh, there was everyone looked like me. So there was never a moment where I wonder about, am I inferior to someone else or anything like that. The kids that I go to school with all through my years of completing school in Jamaica looked like me. There was the odd Caucasian or Asian person, but that's about it. So I never had to wonder. There was never an issue with the color of my skin growing up. Yeah.
And then how long ago did you come to North America?
I came here in 2010. Okay. So I would say 10 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, I moved to rural Alberta in Leduc, of all places. So it was very different. That's when I realized that people see color.
Wow.
Was it quite a culture shock?
Oh, in every way. Every way. It's a small community, similar to Yellowknife with the size, but the difference is it's not as diverse as Yellowknife, which you'd think a city so close to Edmonton would be very diverse, right? But it wasn't. So I could count on one hand how many Black people were living in that town.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, it was a predominantly white farming town. So it was definitely an eye-opener, especially having my kids go to school. That's when I realized, there's no Black people here. Like in the whole school that Kaylee went to and started kindergarten in, I think she was the only Black girl or Black child in her kindergarten grade.
Wow.
There was 2 kindergarten class.
Wow.
Okay. So in both kindergarten classes, she was the only one.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was a pretty eye-opening thing. Yeah. How about you, Steph?
Well, I grew up in Toronto. Jane and Finch was where I was born into Jane and Finch. I spent the first 9 years of my life there and then moved not too far from there. So within the North York area, that's where my family and I grew up. So when I was younger, I truly didn't necessarily understand what racism was. And it wasn't until I got into my teenage years that I really began to kind of experience what that was and what it felt like. And just some experiences, even my brothers and I were talking recently and talking about their experiences, and some of the common ones that, you know, my brothers experienced is being pulled over by the cops for no reason and being questioned. And another common one, which I experience, is when you go into a store, you're being followed. And you can tell and you can see it and you feel it and you know it. And also if you're going into a store that is a bit more high end, that's when people aren't coming to you to ask if you need any help. Even if you do go into a store, even if I've gone into a store or a car dealership, like you're not the first one, because automatically they're assuming that you're coming in there without money or finances to be able to buy or purchase the same thing or similar things to somebody else different that walked in after you.
Wow.
Those are like similar experience, like common experiences that I experienced in growing up in Toronto, the big city. And yeah, so that's kind of some of the experiences that I was able to identify. But another piece, as I got older, I began to realize where it also impacted not only my life, but like my brother's life, was within the school system. I think it's called systematic racism, where now that I'm older and I've met various people that are my age, I think it was like a year ago, I went to do some assessments and stuff and learned that I'm dyslexic. So after learning that, I realized how, like, why I had such a challenging time in school. And my brothers and I all are dyslexic, and all of our experiences were completely traumatic in the sense that no one helped us. No one was able to offer us support or intervention or be able to walk my parents that, you know, that may not have known what a learning disability was, that support. But then when I meet people that are my age that don't look like me with the same diagnosis, they were diagnosed, they did receive intervention, and were able to experience far more success earlier on in life because they got that help and that support.
Wow.
Yeah, that's so heartbreaking to hear.
And so you've had all of these experiences in Toronto, and then it was from Toronto that you moved up to Yellowknife, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And that was also 2010, was it?
Yeah, that's so funny. Yeah.
Wow. So happy 10 years.
Yes, exactly.
Wow, oh my goodness.
10 years for me in Yellowknife.
Wow. So you're close to that.
Yes.
Wow. So when you moved up to the north, was there a culture change or shift in your perspective of how people saw you? Like, was the culture of Yellowknife and the north much different than what you experienced growing up in Toronto?
I would have to say, yeah, it was completely different. What was funny was that my experience, I'm sure our experience is a bit similar with with moving to Yellowknife. Because before moving here, all my Toronto people were like, "You're gonna be the only Black one there." You're
Right.
you know, just all of those things. So be prepared. You know what I mean? So, and they put you on edge, really, like, oh my goodness, like, what's gonna happen? You know?
Because you and Lisa like chose to go like just really quick, didn't you?
Oh yeah.
What? How? Like, what? Can I ask what your story is and what pulled you?
How much time do we have?
we got all
We
night.
got time.
Yeah,
We
we
got
got
time.
time. You know.
Oh my goodness.
Is there a short version or no?
There's a short version. Yes, there is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell us
So-
whichever one you want.
No, I'm going to tell you the short one because it's almost bedtime over here. No, I would say the short version is that I was working in a school board for like 6 years, and Lisa was working in a daycare in Toronto, and a friend of ours that lived in Windsor had moved out here. And
Right.
and ever since he moved out here, it just sparked a bit of conversation or curiosity, I would say, because never in my life, I'm sure Lisa's too, that we thought about Yellowknife other than seeing the weather on the TV and learning it in school, maybe in grade 5. So that just opened up dialogue, and one day I was just like, you know what, I think I want to move to Yellowknife. And I called Lisa one day out of the blue, and I thought Lisa, like Johnelle, was born and raised in Jamaica. Hot Jamaica. So going to Toronto, it was a shock, right? For their bodies to adjust to the temperature.
Okay.
So I thought for sure Lisa was going to laugh at me and be like, I am not going to Yellowknife. Are you crazy? And that day I called her, she had actually lost her job. They were telling her they were closing the daycare down and wouldn't be reopening anywhere. Wow. So she was actually like, perfect timing. And just over the time that from that day that we had that conversation, just God continued to just open all these doors, like one right after the other. Wow. And just confirming just, you know, his will for us to be here in Yellowknife. And within, I think it was 6 to 8 months, we left with 2 suitcases.
Oh my goodness.
And we came to a full-time job here in a fully furnished home with a vehicle, brand new vehicle that was purchased for us. And that's when our journey of fostering started.
Wow.
So that's the short version.
That was a very amazing story. Thank you for sharing.
And then it was December, right? Because when you got off the plane, I wonder if you had the same experience that I had. It's like when you get off the plane, like at most international airports in the South, the provinces, you know, you get off the plane and you walk through a gateway or whatever, in like you're still inside, right?
You step off the plane and you go back inside.
Whereas in Yellowknife, you know, you get off in the winter and you catch your breath and you're like, you're hyperventilating, and then you walk inside. Did you have a similar experience, Stephanie?
Listen to me, Niels. We came on one of the coldest days. I think with the windshield, it was like minus 51.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my
Lord.
It was cold. Yeah, it was cold.
Yes.
Wow. And then, you know, you joked earlier, your friends were saying, you know, are you going to be the only Black person up here? I think, right? You know, it's what's interesting now. Would you say that Yellowknife is fairly diverse?
Yeah. So that's where we were going with it. So when I came there, we found that there were, it was very multicultural. And the level of racism that I experienced growing up in the bigger city, I didn't experience it here.
Wow.
Yeah, but then we'll get to that part when you get to the other question, because there's a reason for that.
Totally, yeah.
What about you?
And so, yeah, Johnelle, how did you feel like culture shift from, was it Leduc you were in? And then moving up?
I thought it would be another experience of Leduc. I thought it would be maybe 1 or 2 Black people, and that would be all. But then when I came, I was like, pleasantly surprised. I was very surprised. It's a little melting pot.
Right.
Yeah, it is a melting pot. It's nice
Yeah,
here.
it's true.
I definitely haven't experienced any form of racism here.
Oh,
Wow.
wow. That's amazing.
To Leduc,
Yeah.
yes, where not only myself but also my children have, and it's those subtle like comments that when you play it back in your head, you're like, that doesn't sound right. Even in the schools in Leduc, you'd think that, okay, then it's right next door to Edmonton, a very
Right.
multicultural city. And a teacher once, there was a lice outbreak at school, and Kelly was just in kindergarten, and they were checking everyone's hair, and they got the comb and they walk up to her and they're like, oh no, the comb won't go through your hair. And they just walk off. They didn't even bother to check. Yeah.
Wow.
So those little comments and actions, right? Like a 4-year-old, like, why would you say that? Even if you were to just playfully go through her hair and just be like, oh, you're okay, you don't have lice. Like right there, you've singled out and made her feel like something is now wrong with my hair.
So was
'Cause it's
this,
not
were
straight.
you there, or was this something that she came back and told you?
Yeah, she told me that they didn't check her hair because it was too much.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. So then she wanted her hair straightened because the other kids had their hair straight and it's easier. And so those little things is where they plant the seed of you're not good enough and you need to look this way to be accepted or to be okay. So moving here in Yellowknife, like my kids didn't experience that. It was just fun. Everyone was inclusive. Like everyone was inviting my kids out to like play dates, and it was just, oh, another new kid in town, someone new to play with, an extra friend. Yeah. So it was definitely different.
Yeah.
You know, I think like my fear in all this, and thank you for sharing that, is that the dialogue that happens, that it will kind of just become a fad. That like my fear is that that the talks and conversations that we're having about racism will just, you know, kind of like fade away and trend away. And I pray and I hope that that happens. But I think, to be honest, praying and hoping is just not enough. You know, conversations still need to take place. I think conversations need to follow with action. And so, you know, what do you hope will come out of all the discussions or that are taking place, you know, whether it's in the church or schools, or different levels of government, you know, if you want to pick one of them. So I'll just ask it again, like, you know, what do you hope will come out of these discussions that are taking place, whether that's like church, schools, or different levels of government?
I just for just overall as human beings, I just think that there needs to be some self-awareness at the end of the day with everyone, right? People need to be able to recognize their own biases, which we all have. And it's just being able to recognize that and being aware of doing self-inventory and just being okay with holding others accountable. It doesn't matter which environment it is in, right? If it's at work, if you don't go to church and you have to work or you're among friend and family, you need to be able to hold people accountable. I think that's the most important part. Because if I'm okay sitting around while you speak and hate on one person because of their skin color, I'm condoning your actions. I'm letting you know it's okay for you to spread those lies or believe these things. So the moment that we start to hold each other accountable and just correcting people, it doesn't matter how old they are or because a lot of people are like, oh, maybe my aunt or my grandparent or my parent is just set in their ways. They've always believed this to be true, so I can't call them out because they won't change. No, you need to call them out. You need to make them feel uncomfortable so that when they're thinking to even say it, they're like, oh, she's here or he's here. He's going to breathe down my throat. I can't say this.
Wow.
or else it's going to spark an argument and everyone is going to feel uncomfortable. So that's what I want. I want people to just hold each other accountable. I want us to start there and then educating ourselves. Because if you're going to sit down and say slavery was so long ago, why are we still having to deal with this? Why are we still having to apologize? Our ancestors were the ones that did the action. Why are we having to say sorry? Why are we having to pay the price for their actions? If you educate yourself, I believe, if you educate yourself on the century of oppression, you will feel pulled to apologize. You'll be, you just feel this heaviness of, oh my God, what can I do? I need to do more. I need to say more. And even if you're shouting, you're feeling like you need to be heard more. You need to be louder. So once you're educated on all the oppression that one race is experiencing, all the bloodbath, then you're going to feel some form of guilt or hurt or sadness.
I want to be a part of this.
I want to be a part of the solution. You're going to be a part of the conversation for change. You're going to then educate the generation after you.
Yeah.
You're going to rip up the textbooks that say, okay, then these people were born slaves and were taken because they were savages and all. You're going to rip up those textbooks. You're going to rip up the textbooks that like glorify Christopher Columbus, glorify the Queen's actions. You're going to rip up those textbooks and you're going to speak that they're all lies. So those are the things that I want people to do. I want them to educate themselves. I want them to hold each other accountable. And then we'll start to dismantle the old system that was built, because it's not broken, it was built that way.
Yeah.
So I want that old system to be dismantled. And then we'll see a change within the church.
Wow.
Because if everyone is educated within the church, if everyone is holding each other accountable within the church, then when someone posts ignorant things on their Facebook and being called out by all their Christian friends, then they're going to feel uncomfortable. Then they're going to feel like, okay, then I can't face this person on Sunday. I can't face all these people because not only one person called me out, like 10, the whole congregation called me out.
Yeah.
So then you're going to then the conversation is going to start, because then someone is going to call you out and then educate you.
Right.
And okay, then this is why what you're saying is ignorant, and this is why what you're saying is a lie. And that's what we need. We need people to understand, like, you can't say, okay, then in the church, oh, I love God and I'm such a good Christian. But yet still, I believe that one race is superior than the next. We're all the same blood run through all our veins.
Yeah.
So true.
Like, or are you going to feel comfortable to come to me and pray for me and pray for my sickness and whatnot if you think you're superior than me? That means we're not on an equal playing field right now.
I would definitely have to say that was during the whole movement with the Black Lives Matter, when everything happened with George Floyd.
Yes.
Thank you. That was a hard pill to swallow.
Wow.
Because I would say that it was at that time that I really began to see that a lot of my unsaved friends were the ones that were calling and checking and owning up to their own biases and certain thoughts and behaviors and actions that they didn't realize were either racist or offensive, and were able to apologize and address those things. Or even if they just called to be like I see you, I hear you. And what was hurtful, that there were many church family members and stuff like that either were silent or were actually trying to justify different things through saying different things or not saying anything at all. And I found that to be like a really, really challenging pill to swallow. Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough when it's like the silence is actually louder than anything.
Yeah.
And wow. Stephanie, you said the words Black Lives Matter, and I just want to ask you that question. Like, what do you think people are saying when we hear Black Lives Matter, focusing on the words specifically? Or I'll take a moment and say, even when I was posting things on Facebook, I had some friends of mine text me back and say, well, isn't it all lives matter? No, yes, like all lives matter, but I'll ask the question to you, like, what do you think that means?
Well, I would have to say, like, in this time where we are visibly seeing it yet again, where it's at the forefront of our minds and our lives, that we want people to hear. And what it means for me is that our lives mean something. It's of value. It's of worth. And that when we say that, we don't stand in a position where we're saying that we don't think that individuals that are Black, that commit crimes or do evil things, shouldn't be held accountable. However, if they are committing the same crime as someone that is not a minority, the same level of discipline or action that is given should be equal.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And we're not standing up and speaking out and having a voice and wanting to be heard because we're saying that we believe that when a Black individual does something wrong, they shouldn't be held accountable. And I feel that oftentimes that's what people are trying to say and are trying to have that dialogue or debate. No one is saying that. The fact is that oftentimes when we leave our homes, we sometimes don't know if we're going to come back because of the color of our skin.
Yeah.
My brothers drive throughout Toronto. You always have the fear that one day, just because of the color of their skin, they may not make it back home alive for nothing that they have done, but just for being Black. Like my brother explained to me recently that he's been pulled over just for being Black. The guy had no reason to pull him over. And when he asked him what was the issue, he was like, "Okay, you can get going."
He didn't explain it all.
He made it out alive.
Wow.
And having to have that conversation with your child.
It's hard.
Yeah. And that if you love, like as Johnelle was saying, like if you love me, you will speak, you will be a voice for us. And I feel that because people don't understand what it feels like to wake up every day and know that there is somebody close to you that might experience some type of racial, help me here, Johnelle. Inequality.
Yeah, or injustice. Yeah.
Injustice. Because they can't understand it, they may never be able to speak up against it.
It's just heartbreaking.
But for me, I just think like with the whole Black Lives Matter movement, I just think that this generation is just at a breaking point. That's the beginning of the Black Lives Matter. We're at a breaking point. We're at a place in history where we're tired. We're tired. Our ancestors have been fighting for their freedom, so that we can live free. They've put their lives on the line. And we're still not free.
Yeah.
This is a facade, like we're really not free. So it's like, okay, then when are we going to draw a line in the sand and just say no more? And that's what's happening right now. So that's what Black Lives Matter to me is, a line in the sand. Like we're not doing this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We're not guinea pigs anymore. We're not going to be experimented on. We're not going to be ill-treated. We're not going to be murdered and slaughtered like animals.
Yeah.
We're just not going to stand for it anymore. We're not going to sit by while and bury our children and mourn our grandchildren. We're putting a line in the sand. So when people are not understanding and they're saying all lives matter, at no point has anyone said no other life matter but Black life.
Right.
What we're saying is every life matter, but why isn't the Black life like being cared for? Why isn't Black people being loved? Why aren't they being protected?
Treated equally. And
treated equally. That's what we're saying. So when people use ignorant comment to say all life matter, it just irks me. It's hurtful, one thing. And then you see them appalled over different things that's going on in society. Oh, like, did anyone say all life matter when 9/11 happened and people were racially profiling Islamic groups and saying, okay, then anyone that has a hijab on or anyone that has their head tie on, they're a terrorist. Was people saying like, oh, all life matter then? We shouldn't racially profile an Islamic man or woman. No one said that. No one said that at all. So it's like, okay, when it's convenient, we're going to say all life matter. But when it's not convenient, we're going to say, okay, we need to racially profile this group because someone in that religion or group has committed a crime. So we need to label that group and we need to hate that group. When America was going to war in Vietnam, anyone that spoke against the war and say, okay, then we need to leave the Vietnam people alone, they were locked up.
Right, yeah.
They were speaking against their country. No one was saying all life matter then. No one was saying the Japanese life matter. No one was saying the Vietnamese life matter. They were saying America needs to go and do what they need to do. So we need to have a level playing field. That's what we're asking for. We need to have the same justice and the same book that you lay for one thing, you need to lay it for the other. That's just it.
Yeah, it's like with 9/11, I mean, while that was such a tragic attack, like we say, never forget, right?
Yeah.
With Black Lives Matter, within the context of the church, I used this analogy recently when I was speaking somewhere, and it's like Jesus is speaking in Matthew chapter 5, and he said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit," and then you have that one guy saying, "All lives matter." Well, that would be like somebody saying, "Well, Jesus, what about the middle class? What about the rich?" No, you guys are covered. Like, you know, right? And so, no, I hear what you're saying, and then. And it was interesting, Stephanie, what you were saying about, like, you know, not the same fair treatment even within the judicial system. I'll use an example that really impacted me here, and I'm going a bit off script because it just came to my mind. But there was a scenario, and anyone can just correct me on the facts if I mess it up. But I believe a white female cop had, I can't remember if she had killed someone or she might have walked into an apartment. I think and then a fellow stood up and he was Black, and I think she killed him, and then the brother was testifying in court.
Yes.
You remember which, right? And so the brother being Black, and I remember the judge was Black, and the brother was saying, like, I forgive you, and he said this to the cop who was going to be charged with however many years for going to jail, right? For this, and she said, "I forgive you." Or sorry, the brother said, "I forgive you." And like everyone was just impressed at the fact that the brother who was Black said that he forgave the white cop. And then a friend of mine who was my former youth pastor, who's Black, he posted something that was very convicting. And he's like, "Some of you are so impressed by the fact that he said that he forgave the white cop. It goes more than that. He not only just forgave her, he knew that if the tables were turned, the sentence would have been so different. And that sickened, like that made me sick when he posted that, but it was just so sad because it's sadly true.
Yeah, so we see it all the time where it just being displayed on social media and within the news, that, you know, an innocent Black man that would speak up for his innocence while being approached by a cop can be killed. Innocent Black man that's a father, that is educated, that also had a father figure in his home, because apparently that's a whole other issue too, that gets Black boys killed, but we won't go there.
That'll be the next podcast.
Yeah, exactly. But a profound Black man, if he stands there and tries to defend his innocence, could be killed and has been killed. While you can see everywhere, if there is a white boy, teenage boy with a rifle in his hand, or man with a rifle after killing a number of people, we've seen police use the skills or the training that they have to take him into custody alive, and will even stop and get him something to eat and something to drink. And those instances can happen minutes apart from each other. And that's the reality, right? That's where we're talking about. Even if you had the same scenario where a Black man with a rifle killed 3 people and a white man with a rifle killed 3 people the same exact way, the reality is the Black man would die for that crime, while they would gently and carefully take the white man into custody. And that's what we're speaking of. Just an equal playing field. That's what we want to see. And that's it.
Wow. What a raw conversation, and thank you for your vulnerability. You know, I think the big takeaway for me, while there was so much good stuff in there, was just, I think it's important that we educate ourselves. You know, slavery was just over 400 years ago, and we need to recognize that the impacts of what happened then still affect us today. And we need to ask the question, why? You know, there are micro issues which are bringing a macro problem to the surface. So we see someone getting killed at the hands of police, which then asks a macro question of racism. And so we tend to really focus on those isolated issues. But I think, you know, it is causing things to come to the surface and address the macro issue of racism, which I think is, while it is heartbreaking and difficult, it is necessary to be able to work through these difficult conversations and to have them. I know for me, like there was a show, actually it was a show we watched on Netflix called 13th, and it talked about some of the systemic racism, right? And like, you know, for you, that was tough to watch.
Yeah, for me, like, I couldn't even watch the whole thing at once. We had to stop. Yeah,
we watched 20 minutes of it and stopped.
And like, I would encourage you to watch that if, like, for those who are of age. I think that's something that is really important to be educated on, what those people went through. And yeah, and it's just evident that that's still today.
And
a lot of it.
I don't think with education, I recently, thank you for sharing that. Like, I listened to an audiobook called The Color of Compromise, which was by Jemar Tisby, who is a Black professor in the United States. And this is, and he's a Christian. And he talked about even how the church was complicit in racism. Just an example, like, I grew up Pentecostal. And there's a fellow named William J. Seymour who did this thing in Los Angeles in 1906, and it was the Azusa Revival. And this is like well known within the Pentecostal movement of how Pentecostalism really began to come into the United States and then later into Canada. But there was something profound I learned in that book that really stuck with me, was that I didn't even know about William J. Seymour, was that when he was wanting to attend seminary, because of the color of his skin and because of the laws at the time, because he was Black, he actually wasn't allowed to come into the classroom full of white people. He actually had to sit outside.
Yeah.
And I've grown up in the Pentecostal church, and I've never ever heard that story. And so just as we conclude, because this is just the first part, and we're going to continue, and then the next time we're going to have the next episode, and we're going to continue on with this great conversation. But I would encourage you just to educate yourself and to ask these difficult questions, wrestle through it.
For sure.
Thank you for joining us in our basement.
Thanks for joining us today in our basement.
Yeah, and before you go, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Go ahead and share this content in your social media platforms, and we hope to see you next time in our basement.